At the farthest edge of known space, where even light seemed hesitant to travel, the stars of the Zethurian expanse burned faint and cold. It was a region the Empire rarely patrolled, not because it was dangerous, but because it was empty, useless, forgotten. Commander Vaylor Trask preferred it that way. Silence meant control, silence meant certainty. From the command deck of the dreadnought Oblivion Spear, Vaylor stood motionless, his sharp gaze fixed on the endless black stretching beyond the reinforced viewport. The Empire had ruled for centuries without challenge. Entire civilizations had risen, resisted, and vanished beneath its might. There were no rivals left, no threats worth nomming. Until the silence broke. "Commander," a sensor officer said suddenly, his voice tight, strained in a way Vaylor had never heard before. "We're picking up something." Vaylor didn't turn, clarify. "There's a mass reading, large, extremely large," the officer hesitated, "but it wasn't there a moment ago." Now Vaylor turned. "That's not possible." "I know, sir, but the readings." "Run it again." "I already have." The deck grew still. Officers exchanged uneasy glances, their movements slowing, their confidence slipping in subtle ways. The Empire's systems didn't fail. Their sensors didn't lie. Vaylor stepped forward, looming over the central display. "Project it." The holographic map flickered to life, stars scattered like dust across the void. Then there. A distortion. Not a ship, not yet. A ripple. Like space itself was being pulled inward, folding in on something unseen. "What am I looking at?" Vaylor demanded. "No known phenomenon matches it," the science officer replied, his voice barely steady. "It's not gravitational, not temporal. It's like something is forcing its way through." The ripple deepened. The stars behind it bent, stretched into thin lines of light, as if reality itself were being dragged apart. Then, it happened. No explosion, no flash. Just arrival. A warship. Massive, silent, wrong. It didn't glide into existence. It simply was occupying space that had been empty a heartbeat ago. Its hull was smooth and dark, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. No markings, no insignia, no energy emissions. Nothing. Vaylor's instinct screamed. "Scan it," he ordered sharply. "Running full-spectrum analysis." The officer paused. His hands froze over the console. "Commander, we're not getting anything." "What do you mean, anything?" "No heat signature, no radiation, no electromagnetic output. It's like it doesn't exist on any detectable level." "That's impossible." "Yes, sir." Vaylor stared at the object. It hung in space like a contradiction, something that shouldn't be real, yet undeniably was. Then it moved. Not forward. Not accelerating. It shifted. One moment it was thousands of kilometers away. The next, it was right there, looming impossibly close to the Oblivion Spear. Gasps erupted across the bridge. "No propulsion," the navigation officer whispered. "No transition phase, it just changed position." Vaylor felt it then, that unfamiliar tightening in his chest. "Battle stations," he said, his voice low but firm. Alarms screamed to life. The dreadnought responded instantly, shields rising, weapon systems charging, targeting arrays locking onto the unknown vessel. "Target acquired," the tactical officer confirmed, awaiting firing command. Vaylor didn't answer. He was watching the ship. Waiting. The unknown warship slowly rotated, as if acknowledging their presence. Along its surface, a single line of light began to glow, thin at first, then brighter, stretching across the length of its hull. "A weapon. Charging." "Commander," the tactical officer snapped, "we need to fire now." Vaylor's mind raced. Nothing about this made sense. No known species had technology like this. No known physics allowed it. And yet... "Hold," Vaylor said. The word shocked the bridge into silence. "Sir," the officer asked. "We don't understand it," Vaylor replied. "And you don't fire blindly at something you don't understand." The glowing line intensified, humming with a strange, silent energy that seemed to vibrate through the very fabric of space. Then, everything went dark. No warning. No transition. Every screen blinked out. Every system died. Even the faint ambient glow of the command deck vanished, plunging them into complete, suffocating blackness. "Report," Vaylor barked. No answer. Only breathing. Fast, uneven, afraid. "They've taken control," someone whispered. "No," another voice said, trembling. "It's worse than that." Vaylor opened his mouth to speak. And froze. Because the darkness wasn't empty anymore. Something was there. Not seen. Not heard. Felt. A presence. Ancient, cold, certain. And then, a voice. Calm, human. Right inside their minds. "This is Earth Warship Aegis Null." Vaylor's blood ran cold. Earth. That name shouldn't matter. It shouldn't mean anything. But somehow, it did. And as the darkness pressed in around them, suffocating and absolute, the voice spoke again. Target acquired didn't just fill the bridge of the Oblivion Spear, it pressed against it. Every system was dead. No status lights, no tactical feeds, no hum of engines. Even the artificial gravity flickered for a moment, just long enough to remind them how fragile control really was. Commander Vaylor Trask stood frozen, every instinct screaming that something far beyond technology had just taken hold of his ship. "Report," he demanded again, louder this time. "Nothing." "Then, they've cut everything," the communications officer whispered somewhere in the dark. "I can't access a single system. It's like we've been disconnected from reality." Vaylor clenched his jaw. "That's not possible." "Commander," another voice said, trembling, "I can't even access internal diagnostics. It's like the ship itself doesn't recognize us anymore." A low murmur of fear spread through the bridge. This wasn't a systems failure. This was control. Total, absolute. And then, the voice returned. Not through speakers. Not through comms. Inside them. Clear, calm, unmistakably human. "This is Earth Warship Aegis Null." The words echoed through their minds, perfectly synchronized, as if thought itself had been hijacked. Vaylor stiffened. "Identify yourself," he snapped, "by authority of the Imperial." "There is no authority here," the voice replied, cutting him off without force, yet somehow impossible to resist. Silence followed. Heavy, suffocating. Then a faint glow flickered across the bridge. Not from the consoles, but from the air itself. Images began to form. A planet. Blue. Fragile. Beautiful. Vaylor's breath caught. "Earth," someone whispered. The image shifted. Cities vast, towering, alive. Then, fire. Orbital strikes raining down. Explosions blooming across continents. Entire skylines collapsing into ash. Screams silent but somehow heard. The crew recoiled instinctively. That's not in our archives," the science officer stammered. "We never recorded." "No," the voice said quietly. "You erased it." Vaylor felt something twist in his chest. "That's impossible," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "The Empire doesn't erase history." A pause. Then, "You don't remember what doesn't serve you." The images intensified. Human ships primitive, outmatched, fighting desperately against overwhelming alien forces. Imperial forces. Vaylor's forces. "No," he whispered. The voice didn't rise. "It didn't need to. You came to Earth when we were weak," it said. "You judged us insignificant." The burning planet faded. Darkness returned. Then, something changed outside. The void beyond the viewport flickered, barely visible in the absence of power. A shape shifting. Growing. Evolving. "What is that?" someone whispered. "They're still out there," another officer said, "and they're changing." Vaylor stepped forward, eyes locked on the faint silhouette beyond the glass. The warship. But it wasn't stable. Its structure moved, like liquid metal, constantly rearranging, adapting, becoming something new with every passing second. No fixed design, Vaylor murmured. No structural limits. The voice returned. You're trying to understand us, using rules that no longer apply. Vaylor's fists clenched. Humans don't have this kind of technology. Silence. Then, you're right. For a split second, everything felt still. Then the voice continued. We're not the humans you remember. Power surged back. Lights exploded to life across the bridge. Systems rebooted violently, alarms screaming, consoles flashing red. Shields offline. Weapons locked out. Navigation's not responding. They're inside the system. No, they're rewriting it. Vaylor gripped the command rail as the ship trembled beneath him. Status on the unknown vessel, he barked. The tactical officer turned, his face pale. They're targeting us. How many weapons? The officer hesitated. Then, all of them. Vaylor's blood ran cold. The external view snapped into clarity. The warship now hovered directly in front of them, impossibly close, its surface no longer shifting, but settled. Final. That glowing line across its hull had expanded. It wasn't a single weapon. It was the entire ship. Charging, the space around it distorted, bending inward as if gravity itself was collapsing under the pressure of what was about to happen. This energy level, the science officer choked. It's off the scale, this shouldn't be possible. Vaylor stared at the ship. At the thing calling itself human. At the impossible power gathering in silence. Open a channel, he said suddenly. Commander, the comms officer stammered. Now. A burst of static. Then. Connection. This is Commander Vaylor Trask of the Imperial Fleet, he said, forcing his voice steady. Stand down immediately or you will be. Destroyed, the voice interrupted. Not mocking. Not amused. Just certain. Vaylor didn't respond. He couldn't. Because deep down, he knew. They couldn't destroy this. They couldn't even touch it. The warship pulsed once, the light intensifying to a blinding white. And the voice spoke one final time. Not just to Vaylor, but to everyone. You still don't understand. A pause. Then, this isn't an attack. Vaylor's breath caught. Then what is it? He whispered. The answer came as the weapon reached full charge. A demonstration. And in the next heartbeat, the warship fired. The moment the weapon fired, nothing happened. No flash. No explosion. No sound. For a single, disorienting heartbeat, the universe held its breath. Then reality broke. A line, thin, perfect, impossibly precise, extended from the hull of the Aegis Null. It wasn't light. It wasn't energy. It was absence, cutting through space like a flaw in existence itself. It touched the nearest Imperial cruiser. And the ship vanished. Not destroyed. Not torn apart. Just gone. One moment it was there, mass, metal, life, and the next it had never existed at all. No impact signature, the tactical officer whispered, frozen in place. No debris, no energy release, it's just gone. The line continued. It passed through a second ship. Then a third. Each one erased with surgical precision, leaving behind nothing but empty space where entire crews had once lived and breathed. Shields, Vaylor snapped. Didn't register, the officer shouted back. It went straight through like they weren't even there. The bridge erupted into chaos. That's not a weapon. It's deleting them. We can't defend against this. Vaylor didn't move. He couldn't. His eyes were locked on the void left behind. Perfectly clean, perfectly silent, perfectly wrong. Return fire, he roared at last. The fleet responded instantly. Dozens of warships unleashed everything they had. Plasma lances, particle beams, antimatter torpedoes, streams of destructive force converging on the lone human vessel. The Aegis Null didn't move. Didn't dodge. Didn't react. The weapons passed straight through it. Not deflected. Not absorbed. They simply missed, as if the ship wasn't entirely there. Direct hits confirmed, no effect, the tactical officer shouted, disbelief cracking his voice. It's phasing, its structure is shifting between states faster than we can track. Vaylor felt something cold settle in his chest. We can't hit it, he said quietly. No, sir. The warship pulsed again. The line of absence reformed, whiter this time, brighter in its unnatural emptiness. No, someone whispered, not again. It fired. Half the formation behind the Oblivion spear disappeared in an instant. Not damaged. Not crippled. Gone. Entire squadrons erased without resistance, without warning, without even the dignity of a final explosion. The screams began. This is a massacre. We're sitting targets. Retreat, we need to retreat. Vaylor slammed his hand against the command console. Hold formation. But the order rang hollow, even to him. Because this wasn't a battle. It wasn't even a fight. It was an execution. Another pulse from the Aegis Null. Another line forming. Vaylor stepped forward, his voice low, tight with something dangerously close to desperation. Stop. The word slipped out before he could stop himself. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the weapon powered down. Just like that, silence returned to the battlefield. No more firing. No more death. Only the empty void where a fleet had once stood. Vaylor blinked, his mind struggling to catch up. They stopped, the comms officer whispered. Why, someone else asked. No one had an answer. Vaylor looked at the human warship, still hovering motionless in front of them. Untouched. Unchallenged. Unstoppable. You could have destroyed us all, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The reply came instantly. Yes. No hesitation. No arrogance. Just fact. Vaylor swallowed. Then why didn't you? A pause. Long enough to feel deliberate. Then, because you're still not the threat. The words hit harder than any weapon. Before Vaylor could respond, space behind the Aegis Null began to distort. At first it was subtle, a faint ripple like heat bending the air. Then it grew, widened, tore. A massive rupture split open across the void, stretching farther than any ship, any fleet, any structure Vaylor had ever seen. It wasn't a warp gate. It wasn't a portal. It was a wound, and something was moving inside it. Commander, the science officer said, his voice breaking completely now. That energy reading, it's not stable, it's not even measurable. Shapes formed within the tier. Enormous. Shifting. Waiting. Vaylor felt his breath catch in his throat. That's not reinforcements, he whispered. The voice returned, quiet, calm, inevitable. No. The first shape moved closer to the edge of the rupture. Its outline becoming clearer. Larger than anything that had come before. Vaylor's hands tightened into fists. Then what is it? A pause. Then, what comes after? And as the first of those impossible giants began to emerge, Vaylor realized with absolute certainty. The Aegis Null had not come alone. The rupture didn't behave like anything the Empire had ever catalogued. It didn't stabilize. It didn't swirl like a wormhole or glow like a gate. It strained, edges tearing, stretching, as if reality itself was resisting whatever was forcing its way through. And something was coming through. Slowly, deliberately. Commander Vaylor Trask stood frozen on the bridge of the Oblivion Spear, his mind rejecting what his eyes were seeing. Range, he asked, his voice low, controlled. The navigation officer swallowed. Indeterminate, it's too large. Our systems can't resolve its full structure. Try. I am Commander, it's just, it doesn't fit inside the scan grid. That answer should have been impossible. But so was everything else. The first shape reached the edge of the rupture. For a moment it paused, like something alive testing the boundary of its cage. Then it emerged, and the stars behind it disappeared. Not blocked, not hidden, gone. The thing was vast, so large it distorted perception. Its surface shifted constantly, like layered armor folding over itself in silent, fluid motion. Sections of it glowed faintly, not with energy, but with something deeper, something that felt aware. "That's not a ship, eh?" someone whispered. Vaylor didn't respond, because he agreed. Ships had structure, purpose, design. This thing had none of those. It had presence, weight, intent. Another shape moved behind it. Then another, and another. The rupture widened further, as if reality itself had given up trying to contain them. "Multiple contacts," the tactical officer shouted. "No hundreds, no thousands." The display struggled to keep up, icons flickering chaotically across the holographic map as more and more objects poured into existence. Some resembled ships, sleek, angular, clearly engineered. Others weren't. One twisted like a living organism, its surface pulsing in slow, rhythmic patterns. Another appeared fractured, as if it existed in multiple pieces at once, barely held together by invisible forces. A third simply shifted, refusing to maintain a consistent shape long enough to be understood. Vaylor felt a chill crawl up his spine. "This isn't a fleet," he said quietly. The human voice returned. "You're right." Vaylor's gaze snapped forward. "Then what is it?" A pause. Then, "A record." The word hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Before Vaylor could respond, the bridge lights flickered again. The air shimmered. And suddenly, they weren't on the Oblivion Spear anymore. Or at least, it didn't feel like it. The space around them filled with images, massive, immersive, impossible to ignore. A planet, not Earth, different, alien. Its skies filled with ships, Imperial ships. Bombardment began. Cities burned. Oceans boiled. The world died in fire and ash. The scene shifted. Another planet. Another civilization. Another annihilation. Again and again. Different species. Different worlds. Same outcome. Vaylor staggered slightly, gripping the command rail. "These are war records," he whispered. "No," the voice corrected. "These are consequences." The images grew faster. More violent. More personal. Faces. Voices. Lives extinguished in seconds. "You expanded," the voice continued. "You conquered, you erased." Vaylor's jaw tightened. "That's what empires do." Silence followed. Then, "And this is what happens to them." The images vanished. The bridge snapped back into reality. But the feeling didn't leave. The weight of what they had seen clung to every surface, every breath. Vaylor looked back out at the rupture. More of the massive entities had emerged now, forming a loose, silent formation behind the Aegis Null. They didn't move aggressively. Didn't fire. They just waited. Watching. "Commander," the science officer said, his voice barely holding together. "I'm reading energy signatures from those things that don't make sense. Some of them aren't even following the same physical laws." Vaylor nodded slowly. "I can see that." One of the largest shapes shifted forward slightly. The movement alone sent ripples through space. Weapon systems across the remaining Imperial fleet began to auto-target, reacting to the perceived threat. "Commander, they're locking on us," the tactical officer warned. "Hold fire," Vaylor said immediately. "Sir, if they engage." "They already could have," Vaylor interrupted. Silence fell again. Because it was true. Everything about this encounter made one thing clear. If these beings wanted them dead, they already would be. Vaylor stepped closer to the viewport, his reflection faint against the endless black and the impossible armada beyond it. "What do you want?" he asked. The answer came without delay. Balance. The word echoed through the bridge. Not loud, not forceful, but absolute. Vaylor's throat tightened. Balance for what? A long pause. Then, for what you've done. As if responding to the statement, every entity beyond the rupture began to shift. Not chaotically, not randomly, in perfect synchronization. Vaylor's eyes widened. They're aligning. The tactical officer's voice dropped to a whisper. Commander, they're all targeting us. Vaylor felt it then. The inevitability. The end. Thousands of weapons, each one beyond comprehension, charging in complete, terrifying silence. And at the center of it all, the Aegis Null remained still. Watching, waiting, as if giving them one final moment to understand. Before everything changed, the silence before the storm was worse than the destruction itself. Thousands of impossible entities hovered beyond the rupture, still, aligned, waiting. Every weapon across them was charged. Every trajectory calculated. Every outcome already decided. Commander Vaylor Trask felt it in his bones. This wasn't a battle formation. This was a verdict. Commander, the tactical officer whispered, voice cracking under pressure. All hostile targets remain locked, awaiting your command. Vaylor didn't answer, because there was no command left to give. The Empire had always relied on overwhelming force, on striking first, harder, faster than any enemy could respond. But this wasn't an enemy they could overpower. This wasn't even something they could understand. Open all channels, Vaylor said quietly. The communications officer hesitated. All channels, sir. Every frequency, every band, I want them to hear us. A brief pause. Then, channels open. Vaylor stepped forward, staring directly at the Aegis Null, at the silent fleet behind it, at the end of everything he had ever known. This is Commander Vaylor Trask of the Imperial Fleet, he began, his voice steady despite the chaos inside him. We acknowledge your power. No response. We recognize that we cannot win this engagement. Still nothing. Vaylor swallowed, forcing the next words out. What do you want? The silence stretched, long enough to make every heartbeat feel like it might be the last. Then, a signal broke through. Clean, direct. The central display flickered, and a face appeared. Human, completely, unmistakably human. No armor, no visible augmentation, no sign of the impossible power that surrounded him. Just calm eyes, focused, unafraid. I am Captain Elias Vorn, he said. His voice wasn't projected into their minds this time. It came through the speakers, normal, grounded, almost ordinary. Vaylor stared at him. You're human, he said slowly. Elias nodded once, yes. That's not possible, Vaylor replied. No species evolves this far in such a short time. Elias tilted his head slightly. We didn't. Vaylor frowned. Then what are we looking at? A faint pause. Then, what's left of us? The words landed like a physical weight across the bridge. Vaylor's gaze hardened. You expect me to believe that a single planet, barely spacefaring, became this? Elias didn't react. Instead, he gestured slightly. Behind him, the view shifted, showing part of the massive fleet emerging from the rupture. Not a single planet, he said. A crucible. Vaylor's brow tightened. Explain. Elias leaned forward, his expression sharpening just enough to reveal something beneath the calm. You didn't just invade Earth, he said. You changed it. Images flashed briefly across the display. Fragments. Human cities under fire. Underground shelters. Improvised defenses. Then, something else. Human ships different from before, more advanced, more dangerous. Fighting back. You forced us to adapt, Elias continued, to survive in ways you never anticipated. Vaylor felt a chill. Survival doesn't create this, he said, gesturing toward the fleet. No, Elias agreed. Extinction does. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. Vaylor's throat tightened, so this is revenge. Ilias shook his head immediately. No. The answer was so direct, so certain, that it cut through the tension like a blade. This isn't about revenge, Ilias said. If it were, you'd already be gone. Vaylor glanced at the empty space where half his fleet had once been. He knew that was true. Then what is this? He demanded. Ilias held his gaze. This is the end of something. Vaylor's voice dropped. The Empire. Yes. No hesitation. No drama. Just truth. A low murmur spread across the bridge. You're asking us to surrender, Vaylor said. No, Ilias replied. I'm telling you to stop. Vaylor's jaw tightened. That's the same thing. Ilias leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable. No, he said quietly. Surrender means you lose. A brief pause. This is the only way you survive. The words hit harder than any threat. Vaylor felt the weight of them settle deep in his chest. Commander, the tactical officer whispered. All enemy weapons are still charged. They can fire at any moment. Vaylor didn't look away from Ilias. You're giving us a choice, he said. Ilias nodded once. One chance. Vaylor's hands tightened into fists. And if we refuse? The faintest flicker of something passed through Ilias' eyes. Not anger. Not hatred. Something colder. Then we finish what you started. Behind him, the entire fleet pulsed, every weapon surging with renewed energy. The rupture itself seemed to widen, reacting to the escalation. Vaylor felt it then. The final line. The moment everything would change. He drew a slow breath and asked the only question that mattered. What exactly are we choosing between? Ilias didn't hesitate. An end or an extinction. And for the first time, Vaylor truly understood the difference. Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was heavy. Every crew member aboard the Oblivion Spear felt it pressing down on them, like the weight of an entire future waiting to collapse. Commander Vaylor Trask stood unmoving, eyes locked on Captain Ilias Vorn's image. Around them, the battlefield remained frozen, thousands of impossible weapons aimed, charged, ready to erase everything in a single, silent instant. An end or extinction, Vaylor repeated quietly. The words didn't feel like a threat. They felt like a fact. What does ending the Empire mean? Vaylor asked, his voice steady though his pulse was. Ilias didn't answer immediately. For the first time, he seemed to measure his words carefully. It means you stop expanding, he said. You withdraw from occupied systems, you dismantle the structure that allowed this to happen. A flicker of movement behind him. One of the massive entities shifted, its surface rippling like a living storm. You become something else, Ilias finished. Vaylor let out a slow breath. You're asking us to erase centuries of power, of order. I'm asking you to prevent centuries of destruction, Ilias replied. Murmurs broke out across the bridge. That's not a negotiation, that's surrender. We'd lose everything. They're forcing us into submission. Vaylor raised a hand, silencing them. You speak of destruction, Vaylor said, his gaze hardening. But empires bring stability, we unify, we enforce peace. Ilias' expression didn't change. At what cost? Vaylor hesitated. Images flashed in his mind, the ones they had been shown. Burning skis. Falling cities. Voices that would never be heard again. That's the price of progress, Vaylor said, though the conviction behind the words felt weaker now. Ilias leaned forward slightly. No, he said quietly. That's the price of believing you're entitled to decide who gets to exist. The words struck deeper than any weapon. Vaylor felt something shift inside him, something old, something buried beneath years of command, doctrine, certainty. Doubt. Behind Ilias, the fleet pulsed again, subtle but unmistakable. A reminder. Time was running out. Commander, the tactical officer whispered urgently. Energy levels are rising again, they're preparing to fire. Vaylor didn't look away. If we agree, he said slowly, you stand down. Yes. And you leave. For now. Vaylor's eyes narrowed. For now. Elias didn't soften it. We don't disappear, he said. We observe if the Empire rises again in the same way. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Vaylor understood. You'll come back, he said. Elias nodded once. And next time, he added, there won't be a conversation. Silence fell again. This time it cut deeper. Vaylor turned slightly, looking at his crew. They weren't warriors anymore. Not in this moment. They were survivors, standing on the edge of something they couldn't fight. What happens if we refuse? Vaylor asked, though he already knew. Elias answered anyway. You already saw it. The words echoed in Vaylor's mind. The simulation. The annihilation. The emptiness that followed. Vaylor closed his eyes for a brief moment. The Empire had always been absolute. Unquestionable. But now, it stood on a knife's edge. He opened his eyes again. You're asking me to end everything I've ever served, he said. Elias held his gaze. I'm asking you to save what's left of it. The distinction hit hard. Because for the first time, Vaylor realized the Empire wasn't untouchable. It wasn't eternal. It was fragile. And it had been all along. Commander, the comms officer whispered, we're losing system stability again, they're tightening control. The lights flickered. The air felt heavier. The fleet beyond the rupture shifted slightly, as if responding to an unseen signal. Vaylor felt the moment slipping. Decision closing in. No more delay. No more uncertainty. He stepped forward. Reality shattered. The bridge flickered violently. The stars outside twisted, bending in unnatural directions. The massive fleet gone. The rupture gone. The Aegis null. Gone. Vaylor stumbled, grabbing onto the command rail as the ship stabilized. Status, he barked instinctively. Systems returning to normal, the navigation officer shouted. All readings clear. Clear, someone echoed in disbelief. Vaylor turned back to the viewport. Empty space. No enemies. No fleet. No sign of what they had just faced. His breath slowed, but the weight in his chest didn't fade. Because he knew. It hadn't been real. But it had been true. And somewhere beyond what they could see. Something was still watching. Waiting for the choice he never got to finish. The silence that followed wasn't relief. It was confusion. Raw, unstable, dangerous. Commander Vaylor Trask stood motionless, staring into the empty void where moments ago an entire reality had unfolded, where fleets had died, where impossible beings had gathered, where the end of an empire had felt certain. Now, nothing. Just stars. Cold, distant, unchanged. Commander, the navigation officer said carefully, as if afraid to break something fragile. All systems are stable, no anomalies detected, no foreign signatures within range. That's impossible, someone whispered. It just happened. Vaylor didn't respond. His mind was still inside that moment, standing before Elias, feeling the weight of that choice, hearing those final words echo like a verdict. An end or extinction. Scan the sector again, Vaylor ordered quietly. We already have, the science officer replied. Multiple times, there's no residual energy, no distortion, nothing to suggest anything was ever here. Vaylor's gaze hardened. That's the problem. Because he remembered everything. The weapon, the fleet, the rupture, the feeling, and most of all, the certainty. This was a projection, he said finally. The crew turned toward him. A simulation, the tactical officer asked. Yes. But how, the officer pressed. That level of detail, that scale, it felt completely real. Vaylor clenched his jaw. Because it was meant to. A low unease spread across the bridge. They got inside our systems, someone said. They created a controlled illusion. No, Vaylor interrupted. He turned slowly, scanning the faces around him. They didn't just access our systems, he said. They accessed us. Silence followed. Heavy. Unsettling. You all saw it, Vaylor continued. You felt it. That wasn't just visual data. That was perception, memory, reality itself being rewritten around us. The implication settled in like a slow-moving shadow. They can control what we experience, the science officer whispered. Vaylor didn't deny it. Then why stop? The tactical officer asked. If they had that kind of power, why not just end us right there? Vaylor turned back to the viewport. The emptiness beyond it felt different now. Not peaceful. Not safe. Observed. Because that wasn't the point, he said, as if summoned by the thought. The lights flickered. Just once. Every console dimmed for a fraction of a second. And then, the voice returned. Not loud. Not intrusive. But unmistakable. You're beginning to understand. The crew froze. Source, the comms officer snapped. No signal detected, came the panicked reply. It's not coming through any channel. It's not coming from anywhere, Vaylor said quietly. He stepped forward. You're still here, he said. Yes. The answer was immediate. Vaylor's fists tightened. You said it was a simulation. It was. Then why show it to us? A brief pause. Then, because it hasn't happened yet. The words hung in the air like a blade. Vaylor felt his breath catch. That future, he said slowly, that destruction. It's one outcome, Elias replied. Not the only one. Vaylor's voice hardened. You expect us to believe you're giving us a choice. We are. Another flicker of light. Subtle. Controlled. Everything you saw, Elias continued, was based on your current trajectory, your decisions, your expansion, your belief that power justifies survival. Vaylor didn't argue. Because after what he had seen, he couldn't. You're saying that becomes real, he said. Yes. And if we change. A longer pause this time. Then, so does the outcome. The weight of it settled deep into the room. Not a threat. Not even a warning anymore. A condition. Why? Vaylor asked suddenly. The question caught even his crew off guard. Elias didn't answer immediately. And when he did, his voice was quieter than before. Because we remember what it was like, he said, to be on the other side of that choice. Vaylor's expression shifted just slightly. You could destroy us, he said. You've proven that. Yes. Then why not do it now, and the risk before it becomes a problem? Silence. Long. Deliberate. Then, because that's what you would do. The answer hit harder than anything else. Vaylor felt it in his chest. In his thoughts. In every memory the simulation had forced him to confront. And you're different, he asked. No, Elias said. A pause. We're trying to be. The honesty in that statement left no room for argument. No room for dismissal. Only understanding. Commander, the comms officer whispered, we're being watched. Vaylor didn't need confirmation. He already knew. Not through sensors. Not through data. But through something deeper. Awareness. They're still here, he said softly. Yes, Elias replied. Watching. Waiting. Not as enemies. Not yet. But not for long, Elias added. Vaylor's eyes narrowed, meaning. Another pause. Then, the next time you see us. The voice lowered. Colder. Final. It won't be a simulation. The light stabilized. The presence faded. The silence returned. But it wasn't empty anymore. Because now, They understood what it meant. The Imperial Council chamber had never felt so small. For centuries, it had been the center of absolute power, the place where worlds were claimed, species were judged, and entire civilizations were erased with a vote. Now, it felt like a courtroom, and the Empire itself was on trial. Commander Valor Trask stood at the center of the chamber, surrounded by towering figures of authority, high counselors, generals, architects of expansion, beings who had never known fear. Until now, you're asking us to believe, the High Chancellor said slowly, that a single encounter, one unverified anomaly, should overturn centuries of dominance. Valor didn't flinch. I'm not asking you to believe, he replied. He activated the projection. I'm asking you to see. The chamber darkened. Then, the simulation began. The rupture, the fleet, the impossible weapons, ships vanishing without a trace, worlds burning in silent consequence. And at the center of it all, the Aegis Null, watching, waiting, judging. No one spoke as it played. Not a single interruption. Because it didn't feel like a recording. It felt like a memory. When it ended, silence consumed the chamber. One of the elder counselors leaned forward, his voice unsteady. This could be fabricated. Valor met his gaze. It could, he said. A pause. But it was. You can't prove that. No, Valor admitted. Because they didn't leave proof. The words echoed. Uncomfortable. Unavoidable. Another counselor rose, agitation breaking through his composure. This is manipulation, he snapped. Psychological warfare, they're trying to scare us into submission. Valor turned to him. They already could have destroyed us, he said. That stopped him. They demonstrated it, Valor continued. Not to threaten us, but to show us what happens if we don't change. The High Chancellor narrowed his eyes. Or to force us into weakness. Valor shook his head. No, he said quietly. They gave us something we've never given anyone else. The chamber stilled. A choice. That word carried more weight than any weapon ever could. They didn't demand surrender, Valor went on. They didn't attack without warning. They showed restraint after proving they didn't need to. A murmur spread across the council. Doubt, fear, realization. They're watching us, Valor said. The room fell silent again. Not through sensors, not through fleets, through something we don't understand, and if we continue as we are. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. They had all seen it. Felt it. The end. What do you propose? The High Chancellor asked at last. Valor took a slow breath. The words he was about to say had never been spoken in this chamber. Not once in the Empire's entire history. We stop, he said. Confusion rippled instantly. Stop what? Everything. Now the chamber erupted. That's madness. We'd collapse. Our enemies would rise against us. Valor didn't raise his voice. But when he spoke, they listened. We are the threat, he said. That silenced them. Every eye turned back to him. We've spent centuries believing our power made us right, Valor continued. That survival justified domination, that expansion was inevitable. He paused. It is. The High Chancellor leaned forward, his expression unreadable. And if you're wrong, he asked. Valor met his gaze. Then we lose control, he said. A beat. If I'm right, we lose everything. Silence. Because that was the truth. Not a comfortable one, but a real one. And you believe this Earth fleet will return? Another counselor asked. Valor didn't hesitate. Yes. When? I don't know. A pause. But next time, it won't be a warning. The weight of that settled over the chamber like gravity itself. No one argued. No one dismissed it. Because deep down, They had all felt it. The inevitability. The certainty. The end waiting just beyond their reach. The High Chancellor closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. And for the first time, there was something new in them. Not power. Not certainty. Fear. What would this end look like? He asked quietly. Valor answered without hesitation. We dismantle the Empire, he said. The words landed like a shockwave. But this time, no one interrupted. No one shouted. Because they understood. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't defeat. It was survival. Far beyond their borders. In a place where space itself folded in ways no empire could see. The Aegis Null drifted in perfect silence. No signals. No movement. Just observation. Captain Elias Vorn stood alone, watching the faint echo of the Empire's transmissions. Waiting. Not hoping. Not fearing. Just waiting. Behind him, the impossible fleet remained hidden, still patient, inevitable. A reminder. A promise. Because the choice had been given. And choices had consequences. Elias turned slightly, his expression unreadable. They've seen it, a voice behind him said softly. Elias nodded. Yes. A pause. Will they chain? Elias looked back into the endless dark. Into the future that hadn't happened yet. And the one that still could. I don't know, he said. The silence stretched. Then, his voice dropped. But next time, a faint pulse of energy rippled through the hidden fleet. Cold. Final. We won't ask. And somewhere deep in the fabric of space, something shifted. Not an attack. Not yet. Just the quiet movement of inevitability. Waiting to see what the Empire would become.